Hi there. Welcome. Welcome, Kevin. Nice beard. Welcome, Michael, Ian, and all you other ones. I want to sort of go over what I said last time about consciousness. This is more or less basic Advaita, which, when grasped, makes a large difference in how you regard yourself in the world. Or it can, if you really get it. My vision I had in 1995 was that when I woke up in the morning, I witnessed consciousness coming to me, sort of like a fog bank would approach someone on the beach. Gets closer and closer, and then suddenly you're in it, and consciousness comes alive in you. You're awake. You can open your eyes and the world is there. But I was there to welcome consciousness. I was there before consciousness. And yet I didn't know who I was or what I was. I wasn't even aware that I existed until consciousness came. And because we always, when we're conscious, witness the body there, and it's a constant conjunction. Whenever there's consciousness, we perceive the body, and we assume, like most Westerners, that the consciousness is given rise by the body somehow. And a lot of research is done into brain waves and the functioning of the brain, and to explain different aspects of consciousness, but no one is able to say how consciousness arises in the brain, only what the brain does when various states of consciousness are there, and that's done with magnetic imaging. But we really don't know what consciousness is. But when consciousness comes to us, like in the morning, and leaves us in the evening, we are still there. We're there before consciousness comes, because when I feel it coming, I'm already existing prior to consciousness. And everyone feels that consciousness comes to them in the morning. And, if you practice becoming aware as consciousness is coming to you in the morning, you have to practice for a longer or shorter period of time. But it's fairly easy to do, which is to catch the coming of consciousness and watch it arise in you from your stomach area into the heart, then upward into the brain. And when it reaches the brain, the world, your body, waking, and knowledge all come at the same time. It's like a light bulb turning on, although you see the electricity sort of heading towards the light bulb in that pre-awakening state. You can get quite good at it and watch details of the awakening process. But you really realize you are there before consciousness. Consciousness and unconsciousness come to you. Consciousness comes, consciousness leaves, and you're left in unconsciousness. Now there's some form of awareness of nothingness, but it's not like waking consciousness at all. You can recall it in memory, what it's like to be asleep. You can also remember times when you've woken up in the middle of sleep and not really come to consciousness, but stayed aware of nothingness. But consciousness, and hence the world, is a temporary thing. It's on for 12 or 14 or 18 hours, and then it's off. Where does it go? Gradually, you'll become to realize that you are there, existing prior to consciousness. And that's where Nisargadatta and the others get the concept that you are, what you are essentially is prior to consciousness. And that consciousness comes to you and creates a world with your body. And you live a life in this consciousness. Now, once again, Westerners believe that consciousness illuminates a real material world. When we become conscious, somehow, consciousness conveys to us a real external world that we live in. But to an Easterner, to an Advaitin, all that we can say is consciousness comes to us with an apparent world and an apparent body. And there's no thought to the possibility that there's an external world. Because for the Advaitin, all that there is consciousness. There's nothing outside of consciousness, except that which is prior to consciousness. All that we ever know is consciousness or is an object within consciousness. Even our own bodies are objects within our consciousness. But we can't really say it's our consciousness because it comes to us like an email or a snail mail letter. It's not us. It comes to us. Who and what we are. We can't know, it's invisible. It's beyond existence or prior to existence. And consciousness cannot know prior to consciousness. Consciousness cannot know that which is prior to existence. And all that we know is known through consciousness. Except when we realize that consciousness comes to us. We can actually watch it come to us and hit our brain and explode into the world. We can do that every morning. And then we become quite sure that we exist prior to consciousness. But that which we are, the witness, the absolute, or whatever name you want to give it, we can't know. We can only be it. We can only be it, and then for long periods of time, forget that witness and just live in the world presented by consciousness as if that were the only reality, which is the world that everybody else lives in, the mundane world. The 9-to-5 world. The 9-to-5 followed by supper, television, and sleep. The world of activities, of hobbies, of going out on a sailboat or taking a cruise or racing cars or buying Bitcoin or betting on the stock market. All of that very large range of activities is found in consciousness. And because we've never examined the roots of our consciousness, of our knowing, we assume that that which is revealed by consciousness is real. And we really take no heed of consciousness. But when you begin to explore consciousness, to grasp it as a whole, and it's hard to know how to grab hold of consciousness or to witness consciousness, because consciousness itself doesn't have its own unique attributes. If anything, it takes on the attributes of that which is witnessed. The walls, the sky, flowers, trees. And yet you can grasp the whole of consciousness, the whole of eternity, through effort. You expand your attention and let it pervade the entirety of your consciousness. And you can hold on to consciousness that way and learn about it. And here we make a vital distinction. There's consciousness and all the objects of consciousness and the light of consciousness and the absence of light in consciousness and all of the kaleidoscopic visual phenomena of the world. And there's awareness, awareness of consciousness, awareness of the objects of consciousness. And we can direct our attention to certain aspects of consciousness or the totality of consciousness. Or we can even explore the nothingness that precedes the appearance of consciousness and is there after consciousness disappears. But that which does that is itself unknowable. It doesn't have any attributes. It's not found within consciousness, which we could say is existence. It's beyond existence, prior to existence. It's ontologically, it's on a different level of being prior to your humanity, to your life. And consciousness comes to you. But this awareness, which can be called sentience, means that we're aware of consciousness and the objects within consciousness and the processes within and between the objects in consciousness. We're also able to be aware of the arising of consciousness out of nothingness, the arising, as Nisargadatta says, the arising of beingness out of non-beingness or nothingness, and the disappearance of beingness into non-beingness. That's the essential Nisargadatta. And it fits in nicely to explain our experiences, especially when we're deep enough to be able to witness the coming and going of the waking state, waking consciousness. How many have been able to witness the coming of consciousness and that you're there prior to consciousness? When you can witness that you're there prior to consciousness, you can recognize at least the possibility that you're immortal. Because consciousness is temporary. It happens to you tens of thousands of times. And it can vary. Drink some whiskey or lots of beers, and consciousness takes on a different quality. Be aware of coming awake in the morning, and you watch that out of nothingness, this consciousness comes and creates you when it hits your supposed brain, and the world appears. Suddenly, bam, the world is there. But you can feel the gradual waking up taking place. You're sleeping heavily, and then your sleep gets lighter and lighter. And I don't know exactly how to describe the phenomena, but with me, it's as if the darkness lifts a little, like in early in the morning, the darkness begins to be permeated by the brightness of the sun below the horizon. And at 5 o'clock, it's just starting to get a little more lit, and then more and more lit, and more and more lit, and then the sun appears. The same thing with consciousness. I feel my sleep getting lighter and lighter, and I feel as if something is about to lift. The heaviness of sleep is about to lift. And then I can watch the actual coming of consciousness through my body, rising from my gut into my heart and into my brain. And with that, the explosion of consciousness and existence. Suddenly the world appears, I appear. My body appears. It all happens at once like a miracle. Then at night, I really haven't been able to grasp the going as easily as the coming. It's just that it seems consciousness gradually fades and darkness gets darker and darker and darker, and then I'm asleep. But I don't see the leaving of consciousness like I can see the approach of consciousness. But what if this coming and going of consciousness happens to me before consciousness? That which is before consciousness. That which is before consciousness is not an individual. Although when we awaken, it appears that an individual is awakened. But it's impersonal. It's not like something that happens to me, which would bother me or please me. It's without quality. It's just consciousness, without emotions attached. And then during the day, I can go inside by closing my eyes and feeling consciousness within my body, my awareness to my insides, tactily and visually. The inner eye opens. Which is the astral equivalent of the external eye's vision, of being aware of the existential world. The third eye is aware of your inner world and all those inner states that you can go through, from bliss to ecstasy to God realization, even the self-realization, when it becomes so easy to recognize. Once you realize and see and then understand that consciousness comes to you, you're not moving anywhere. You're sitting on your throne, so to speak, and consciousness comes to you. Now, is that world revealed by consciousness true? Or is it all made up? Is it all a dream? The West assumes one way. East assumes another way. The East assumes that it's just dream stuff, like dreams, but just different in quality. Just like twilight sleep is different from deep sleep. But you are aware, or you become aware, that there's awareness before the coming of consciousness. That might mean that awareness is eternal. And it really doesn't mean that awareness is multitudinal. It could be there's only one awareness. That manifests through all of us separately. Vesselina, Cassie, Raju, Max, Ali Akbar. See, when you start working with the fundamentals, there's nothing personal in consciousness. Except an awareness of us as persons. But that is really conceptual, because we're taking a part of our experience, which is the experience of being alive, as being an individual person. And we build a whole universe of context around that assumption that we're an individual body, an individual ego. Based on all those concepts we've learned and are present around us all the time in science and our upbringing, everyday common sense. Does anybody have a comment or question?
You said